Hey, HOA, we're up to 1864 in our series on course of the Civil War. And these are our guiding questions, same as before. Just to catch up, at the start of 1864, the Confederates are still pretty much defending their territory, although they have tried twice to invade the North and both times been sent packing. By 1864, foreign support is pretty much off the table, thanks in part to the Emancipation Proclamation. The Confederates are facing serious lack of supplies due to the blockade. They've pretty much hit the limit on the number of soldiers they're going to be able to raise, and they're dealing with increasing social unrest. The North is getting stronger and stronger, but they're also dealing with social unrest. There is a general sense in the country that this thing has gone on way too long, and it's time to wrap it up. In January of 1864, we have this really curious incident. Confederate General Claiborne, he's one of the Confederate generals in Tennessee. He's an interesting guy. He's an Irish immigrant. I know we said that most of the Irish immigrants went to the North, but some went to the South, and he's one of them. And so they're having a meeting, and they're talking about, how can we possibly scare up additional soldiers? We're really in a jam. And General Claiborne stands up and says, well, how about this? How about we offer our slaves their freedom if they fight for the Confederacy? And, everybody's jaw kind of drops, and there's crickets in the room, and, nothing's going to happen. Now, this sounds crazy to us, but what Claiborne is basically doing here is he's taking the Confederates at their word. They had been saying that, oh, no, this isn't a war about slavery at all. This is a war about Southern independence, and this is a war about our freedom and that kind of thing. And our slaves love us, and, they are so happy to be, slaves, and we've taken them away from, the savagery of Africa, and et cetera, et cetera. And you say, okay, if all that's true, then, this should be fine. And the fact that it goes nowhere is pretty much an indication that they all know that it's not really true. But that idea is not going to go away forever. Meanwhile, thanks to Lincoln's 10% plan, Southern states are being reconstructed. In January of 1864, Arkansas is going to form a new state government. And this guy, Governor Isaac Murphy, is going to be the new governor. Now, Murphy was a Unionist from the get-go. He lived in a part of northern Arkansas where there weren't a whole lot of slaves, and slavery wasn't terribly popular. And he was one of, obviously a minority because the state did secede, but he was one of the delegates that voted against secession. And one of the few who maintained that position even after Arkansas left the Union. And he came under a lot of pressure for that. But he's just the sort of guy that Lincoln is hoping will be able to take over government duties. Problem is there aren't very many guys with those kind of Unionist credentials in seceded states. Meanwhile, the idea of increasing the pain of the civilian population is, becoming more and more of a thing in 1864. And General Sherman is going to be the guy who really, becomes famous for this. He occupies Jackson, the capital of the state of Mississippi, and the town ends up being destroyed along with a lot of the surrounding plantations. Sherman's famous quote is, "War is hell." And, the idea of this is turn up the heat on the civilian population, make it as unpleasant for them as it can possibly be, and they will eventually get a clue and force their leaders to end the war. We're going to start seeing some new technology during the Civil War. In February 1864, the CSS Hunley, the first real practical submarine that actually successfully sinks a ship. There had been some ideas, toyed around with as far back as the American Revolution. This is the first time anybody actually built one that sank a ship. Now, successful is maybe overstating the matter a little, because in the process of sinking a ship, the Hunley sank, and everybody aboard died with it. In fact, I think the Hunley went out on a couple of training missions, and every time it went out on a training mission, everybody aboard ended up drowning. But there were observers, European observers, who were interested in this technology. And after the war, the Germans in particular got a hold of these plans and refined them. And, it's not going to be that much down the road, a half century down the road, the Germans are going to have a whole freaking fleet of submarines, and those are going to have a big impact in World War I. Another interesting incident that's going to have long-term implications, in March of 1864, something called the Dahlgren Affair. This guy in the picture, Colonel Ulrich Dahlgren, he had been at Gettysburg and lost his foot during the battle, and so, rather than retire from military service, he transferred to the cavalry, where you spend most of your time on a horse, and the loss of a foot is not that much of a problem. He got assigned to a cavalry raid, which is basically going to be like 1,000 guys on horseback, and they're going to raid Richmond. Not clear exactly what they were there for, but Dahlgren is killed in the process, and Confederate officials claim that on his person, after his dead body was recovered, he had in his pocket orders for him to assassinate President Davis and other government officials. This was, widely put out in the newspapers as, oh my God, the savagery of this. It was denied by the Union military. They said these are forgeries. This is just a plan to discredit us. Historians have kind of picked away at this and haven't really reached a final verdict on it. If it's true that that's why he was there, it would make sense that the Union would deny it when things went, crossways, and cover the whole thing up. But that doesn't mean that it's true. It's also, clever propaganda. But that's not really the full significance of this. The full significance of this is there's a guy in Washington, D.C., who's going to hear about this, and it's going to cause him a great deal of outrage because he's a Confederate sympathizer, and he's also an actor. And some of you may know who this guy is going to end up being, but I'll just leave the rest of you in suspense. Okay, March 1864, Grant is going to get the job as overall Union commander. And there had been previous overall Union commanders, and a lot of them, kind of stayed in Washington and sent out orders by telegraph. Grant is different. Grant is going to be with the Army of the Potomac in the field. Technically, Meade is still the commanding general of the Army, but since Grant's right there, Grant is pretty much making decisions. But he's also making decisions for everybody else in the Union Army. And it represents a change in strategy. For Grant and Sherman, this is now going to be total war. This is going to be about taking the enemy on as hard as you can, as frequently as you can. Grant says the reason we've been having problems is because we attack one place and then we attack another place, and the Confederates can shift their forces around to meet those different attacks. Grant says if we attack them every place at the same time, they won't be able to deal with it, and we can wrap this thing up. And at the same time, impose maximum casualties. Grant's theory is the Union Army is something like, 5 times the size of the Confederate Army. And the Union Army can replace soldiers that are killed. The Confederate Army can't. So it's in the Union's interest to have battles with a lot of casualties. The war will get a whole lot hotter, but the idea is it will end sooner. And that's kind of what the total war strategy is about. So Grant is going to get this reputation as this incredibly effective commander. And oh my God, why didn't McClellan think of this, 2 years earlier? And that's not entirely fair, because remember, Grant is using the army that McClellan built. McClellan didn't have the army that McClellan built, at least not at the beginning, because it hadn't been built yet. So Grant is, to some extent, he's the right guy, but he's also the right guy at the right time. The strategy that Grant is using in 1864, if it had been attempted in 1861 or 1862, would have probably ended in, disastrous failure, because they didn't have the numbers yet. So that is, kind of something to keep in mind. Continuing the idea that war is hell, in April of 1864, pretty much the Confederates make good on their threat against black soldiers. General Nathan Bedford Forrest of Tennessee, who had been a slave trader before the war and certainly had no love at all for African Americans, he's going to capture Fort Pillow, Tennessee, which at that time had been manned by a garrison of black soldiers, and he's going to execute every single one of them. He is pretty much following orders that Davis had given, but other Confederate commanders hadn't been quite as enthusiastic about this. Nathan Bedford Forrest is in 100%. And in response to this, Grant is going to end prisoner exchanges. Up until this point in the war, they were doing exchanges. So, X number of Union soldiers come out of prison camps in exchange for X number of Confederate soldiers. Grant isn't going to do that anymore, partly because he's angry about Fort Pillow, but partly because he doesn't want to do anything that's going to put Confederate soldiers back in the field. Even if it means Union soldiers are going to be rotting in a POW camp. He knows that in the long run, that benefits the Union over the Confederacy. But it does mean that a lot of soldiers are going to have to deal with some pretty horrendous conditions in a place where there's not enough food to go around. Oh, and by the way, CSA General Nathan Bedford Forrest, we're going to run into him again a little later, because after the war, he's going to start a group that's going to have a lot of significance. No, I think I'll leave you guessing on that. Okay, so 1864, the noose is tightening. Grant is going to do his own version of On to Richmond, but it's not going to be like previous generals had done. He's going to head south with 100,000 soldiers. He's doing it at the same time that Sherman is attacking Georgia, and other generals are doing things in other parts of the Confederacy. The idea is maximum pressure, maximum casualties for a period of time, and no matter how costly the victories, Grant is not going to retreat. It's not going to be like, Burnside gets, or, there's a defeat at Bull Run and they go back to Washington to regroup. There's a defeat at Fredericksburg and they go back to Washington to regroup. No. This is going to be, no matter how tough it is, they're just going to keep pushing until the end of the war. So we are definitely into the end game. And part of that end game is going to be yet another division between Confederate and inside the Confederacy. There was really only one railroad line that linked sort of the South Central Confederacy, Georgia, Tennessee, that area, with Virginia. And it runs roughly along what's now Interstate 81, down from the Shenandoah Valley and into Tennessee. Once that rail line is cut, it becomes very difficult for the Confederates to shift soldiers between those two theaters. So now the Confederacy has been divided into three parts. There's the Virginia theater, there's the Georgia, Tennessee theater, and then, across the Mississippi, Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana, or at least those parts that are still in Confederate hands, they're kind of on their own. Confederates can't move supplies between these, they can't move soldiers between these. And this is the situation as Lincoln is facing re-election. Now, in the summer of 1864, Lincoln is not all that confident that he's going to be reelected. He knows there's a lot of war fatigue in the country. And what he needs to do is broaden the appeal of his party. The other thing is, the Republicans had kind of got a problem as a political party. They were formed pretty much for one purpose, and that was to stop the spread of slavery into the territories. That's really the only thing that all these Republicans agree on. And that's pretty much done at this point. No matter how the war goes, slavery is not going to spread into the territories. So, you've got a lot of people in this political party who, there are a lot of other issues that they don't necessarily agree on. And Lincoln is going to have to use the war to kind of keep everybody on the same page. And that means reaching out to war Democrats, Democrats who are in favor of continuing the war and ending secession. And to get the support from those war Democrats, they're going to rebrand the party. It's not going to be called the Republican Party because that is a thing that people associate with abolitionism and that kind of thing. It's going to be the National Union Party. And to carry on that theme, Lincoln remains the presidential candidate, but the vice presidential candidate is going to be a war Democrat, Andrew Johnson of Tennessee. He was United States Senator for Tennessee at the time of secession. He was the only Southern senator who did not resign from the Senate when his state seceded. He finished his term in the Senate, and then Lincoln appointed him military governor of Tennessee. And now he's going to be vice president. Because, really, does it matter who the vice president is? I mean, it's a sort of, a political thing. We'll see. By June, Grant is going to be pretty much at the gates of Richmond, and particularly interested in Petersburg. Petersburg, ironically, is south of Richmond, so you wouldn't think it would be significant, but it is because Grant's got supplies coming up the James River, and that Petersburg controls the rail lines south from Richmond. So the only way Richmond connects to the rest of Virginia is through that rail line that runs south from Richmond to Petersburg. It's currently like I-95 if you ever drive around there. And the Confederates, to protect Richmond, they have to protect Petersburg. And to protect Petersburg, this is going to transform into trench warfare. So this is another little foreshadowing of World War I. Lee is never really going to get out of those trenches for the rest of the war, but the war is going to go on for another 10 months. Meanwhile, the tide is also turning out at sea. In June of 1864, the CSS Alabama, which had had a effective career as a commerce raider, sinking Union ships, carrying supplies and trade goods and that kind of thing. The Alabama had been very difficult to catch because it was so much faster than Union warships. But its luck finally ran out off the coast of France, and it was sunk. And this is an indication that generally the Union Navy is getting better and stronger and more effective. And it's in this climate, in July of 1864, that Congress is going to pass the Wade-Davis bill. Congress was not thrilled about the 10% plan. The Republicans in Congress are kind of dominated by abolitionists and Republicans who really felt like the South needed to be punished and not just easily admitted back into the Union and let's all be friends and, forget this unpleasantness ever happened. Part of that, there's a couple of factors in that. Part of it is just, an idea that the South needs to be taught a lesson, that if we just go back to 1859, we're just, going to have another war sooner or later. Part of it is concern about, what's going to happen to the freed slaves. Are they going to be able to keep their freedom? What kind of rights are they going to have? And part of it is politics. These guys have been running Congress for 3 years and having a wonderful time doing it with most of the Democrats elsewhere. As Southern states come back into the Union and send representatives to Congress, these guys might lose their majority, and they're not thrilled about that. So they put forward a much tougher plan for Reconstruction. The idea that no elected government can be formed in these states until a majority, not just 10%, but a majority of the voters can swear not just that they will in the future be loyal to the Union and support emancipation, but that never over the past, 3 years of the war, at no time did they ever support the Confederate States of America. Well, there isn't a single Southern state where a majority of the voters are going to be able to swear that. So if this thing becomes the plan, you're going to have to wait a generation for those states to get, elected governments back. And what happens in the meantime? In the meantime, the Army's going to run the place, and there's going to be no democracy at all. Lincoln thinks this is a really, really bad idea. But he understands that these people have some political power and he is running for office. So he is going to pocket veto the Wade Davis bill, which, if you remember from civics class, the president doesn't veto it, he doesn't sign it, he just sort of lets it die. And Senator Wade and Representative Davis not thrilled about this, but at this point, there's not a whole lot they're going to be able to do about it. And in July, you have sort of the last real gasp of the Confederacy militarily. 10,000 Confederates are going to make their way up to Washington. Now, Grant had pretty much pulled all of the soldiers out of Washington. He doesn't think that Washington is under any threat. They had built a very strong ring of forts all around the city. So most of the guys manning those forts are, guys with, missing arms and missing legs and injured soldiers and that kind of thing. The idea of Jubal Early's raid is to threaten Washington. They've done this in the past, and every time they did it, when, McClellan or Burnside or Hooker was involved, they would rush back to Washington to defend the city. So they're thinking, all right, we can take pressure off Richmond by attacking Washington. There's no way that 10,000 Confederates are going to be able to take Washington and hold it. They're not going to be able to, capture Lincoln. And there are 100,000 Union soldiers down in Virginia who, can very easily come back and take repossession of the city. But they don't want to have to do that. The Confederates make it into the District of Columbia. They make it to Fort Stevens, which is only 5 miles north of the White House. In those days, it was a rural area, but now it's like, right smack dab in the city. The Union is going to hold off these 10,000 soldiers long enough that when a couple of thousand soldiers detached from Richmond make their way up to the city, that's going to be the end of things, and Jubal Early is going to have to retreat. What makes this battle particularly famous is Lincoln. I mean, it's only 5 miles from the White House. Lincoln goes up to see what's going on. And he's becomes the only U.S. president to, as president, personally witness a battle by U.S. troops. And that's him sort of standing there on the edge of the fort. And this is Lincoln, he's 6'4". He's wearing the Lincoln hat and everything. And there are people firing guns like not that far away. They can see him. and nobody's exactly sure who it was, but somebody yells over to Lincoln, "Get your head down, you damn fool! You're going to get shot." And Lincoln says, "Oh, good idea." And he, I mean, the guy standing right next to Lincoln got shot and killed, but Lincoln got the message, and Lincoln is not going to get shot this day. Meanwhile, July 1864, Louisiana is going to have its reconstruction as well. Again, they found a Unionist who was able to do the job. August, the Democrats meet to choose their candidate, and what they want is a negotiated end of the war, some sort of peace arrangement. They're a little vague about exactly how this is going to go, because the only basis for negotiation is either the South gets its independence or not, and they've been pretty clear that Lincoln has been making offers, and they've rejected everything because they want their independence. Democrats are not being entirely clear about what's going to, suddenly persuade them to do elsewhere, but there you go. They nominate McClellan as their candidate. McClellan was not thrilled about, agreeing to Southern independence. He made clear that, he was not into ending the war with, secession still on the table. And so you've got kind of this dispute between war Democrats and peace Democrats. But Lincoln was actually expecting to lose, even at this point. And Lincoln called his cabinet together. He said, "Okay, we're going to lose. But if we lose, we've got some time. The new president won't be sworn in until March, because that was still the rule." He says, "That means we got until March to win the war, because, I don't think McClellan is going to be able to do it with this bunch of, defeatists that he's dealing with." So the plan was big push to win the war before Inauguration Day. And, even despite everything, he'd have probably been able to do that. The war isn't going to last very much longer. But fortunately, it's not going to be a problem for Lincoln, because in September, Sherman is finally going to take Atlanta. And that was just the big sort of victory that Lincoln's going to need to sort of make it look like the war is not just burbling on forever, that it is actually winding down to a close. And, just stick with me, and I can get this thing done. And of course, once again, city burned to the ground. Not entirely clear who's responsible for that, but Sherman is going to get the credit. And slavery is going to be ended in Maryland. Basically, the border states are finally coming around. They can see which way the wind is blowing, and they want to get out in front of it a little bit. At least Maryland does. Although, if you look at the vote for this anti-slavery constitution, the anti-slavery side had lost the election by 2,000 votes until the votes of the soldiers were counted. Leaving aside the possibility that this might be something like 2020, where there's questions about the legitimacy of those votes, soldiers generally were not all that enthusiastic about maintaining slavery. And so it does make sense that that would kind of push it over. And in the entire state of Maryland, 375 votes is the difference between maintaining slavery and not maintaining slavery. Lincoln, of course, is going to win the election, even though there are no electoral votes cast from the 11 states of the Confederacy. The reconstructed governments sent in electoral votes, but Congress didn't count them, didn't make a difference, because, Lincoln's got all the other votes except for 3 states won by McClellan. So either way, the math is going to come out. Lincoln is going to be reelected. And, after taking Atlanta, Sherman is going to make his famous march to Savannah at the sea, cutting a 50-mile wide path of destruction through the state of Georgia, and ripping up infrastructure, ripping up railroad tracks, destroying plantations, making it extraordinarily unpleasant for the people of Georgia, and of course, freeing slaves as he goes. Now, once the war is over, all of this damage is going to be somebody's problem. And that gets us to the end of 1864. And, we've got a very large Union Army, about 10% African American. The Confederate forces are down about 100,000 over the course of 1864, thanks to the total war strategy and the no longer repatriating prisoners. The South has been cut into 3 pieces that can't really communicate with one another, and it is pretty clear that the war is winding down. But it's not over yet.